Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Reading from Purification of the Heart, translation and commentary of Imam al-Mawlud's Matharat al Qulub by Hamza Yusuf. Introduction to Purification. Poem verses 1 to 8. I begin by starting with the heart of beginnings, for it is the highest and noblest of beginnings. Have courtesy with God, the high and the majestic, by practicing modesty and humility, dejected out of shame and humility, humbled in awe, imploring Him, by giving up your desires for life, emptied of covetousness for which His servants have, by hastening to fulfill His commands, and by being weary of the subtle encroachment of bad manners. If you, the spiritual aspirant, realize your attributes of servitude, you will then be assisted with something of the attributes of the eternally besought. Realize your abject character and impoverishment, and you will gain dignity and wealth from the All-Powerful. There is no salvation like the heart's salvation, given that all the limbs and organs respond to its desires. Courtesy, the heart of purification. Imam al-Mawlud begins his Arabic didactic poem with a play on words that is lost in translation. Beginning in Arabic is badu, and the word for heart, qalb, also means to reverse something. Reversing the letters of the word badu results in the word adab, which is the term for courtesy, and that is where this treatise begins. This, since courtesy is the portal of the purification of the heart. Adab in Arabic holds several meanings, in addition to courtesy. Adib, a derivative of adab, for example, has come to mean an erudite person, someone who's learned, as high manners and courtesy are associated with learning and erudition. However, the idea of courtesy is firmly established at the root of the word adab. Imam Mawlud starts his treatise with courtesy, since excellent behavior and comportment are the doorkeepers to the science of spiritual purification. One must have courtesy with regard to God, behave properly with respect to His presence, if he or she wishes to purify the heart. But how does one achieve this courtesy? Imam Mawlud mentions two requisite qualities associated with courtesy: modesty, haya, and humility, dul. Haya in Arabic conveys the meaning of shame. Though the root word haya is closely associated with life and living. The Prophet ﷺ stated, "Every religion has a quality that is characteristic of that religion, and the characteristic of my religion is haya, an internal sense of shame that includes bashfulness and modesty." As children, many of us had someone say to us at times, "Shame on you." Unfortunately, shame has now come to be viewed as a negative word, as if it were a pejorative. Parents are now often advised to never cause a child to feel shame. The current wisdom largely suggests that adults should always make the child feel good, regardless of his or her behavior. However, doing so eventually disables naturally occurring deterrents to behaviors. Some anthropologists divide cultures into shame cultures and guilt cultures. According to this perspective, shame is an outward mechanism and guilt is an inward mechanism, one which alludes to a human mechanism that produces strong feelings of remorse when someone has done something wrong, to the point that he or she needs to rectify the matter. Most primitive cultures are not guilt-based, but are shame-based. which is rooted in the fear of bringing shame upon oneself and the larger family. Islam honors the concept of shame and takes it to another level altogether, to a rank in which one feels a sense of shame before God. When a person acknowledges and realizes that God is fully aware of all that one does and says and thinks, shame is elevated to a higher plane, to the unseen world from which there is no cover. At this level, one feels a sense of shame even before the angels. So while Muslims comprise a shame-based culture, this notion transcends feeling of shame before one's family, whether one's elders or parents, and admits a mechanism that is not subject to the changing norms of human cultures. It is associated with the knowledge of active awareness that God is an all-seeing of what one does, a reality that is permanent. The nurturing of this realization in a person deters one from engaging in acts that are displeasing and vulgar. This is the nobility of prophetic teachings. Imam Mawlud also mentions that one should have dhul, which literally means being lowly, abject, or humbled. The Quran mentions that people who incur the anger of God have this state of humiliation thrust upon them. This humility or humbleness is assumed before God is required for courtesy. Interestingly, the word munkasiran is translated as dejected, though it literally means broken. It conveys a sense of being humbled in the majestic presence of God. It refers to the awesome realization that each of us, at every moment, lives and acts before the august presence of the Creator of the heavens and the earth, and one God, besides whom there is no power or might in all the universe. When we seriously reflect on God's perfect watch over His creation and the countless blessings He sends down, and then consider the kind of deeds we bring before Him, what can we possibly feel except humility and shame? These strong feelings should lead us to implore God to change our state, make our desire consonant with His pleasure, giving up our desires for God's designs. There is pure courtesy with respect to God, a requisite for spiritual purification. The Prophet ﷺ said, "None of you fully believes until his desires are in accordance with what I have brought." Being aligned and at peace with the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ, which embody the legacy of the prophetic teachings of Noah, Abraham, Musa, and Jesus ﷺ, entails striving to free oneself of greed and refusing the ethic of doing something for an ulterior motive that is essentially selfish and dissonant with the teachings of God's Prophet ﷺ. A person should not seek anything from God's servants. If one wants anything, one should seek it from God, the sovereign of the heavens and the earth. The basic rule is to ask God and then work, that is, one should utilize the means that one must use in order to achieve something in the world. Imam Mawlud then says that one should listen to fulfill God's command and be wary of the subtle encroachment of bad manners, namely, faults that one is unaware of. A hadith states, "One of you will say a word and give it no consideration, though it will drag a person who uttered it through the hellfire for 70 years. People often become so disconnected from prophetic teachings that they unwittingly inflict great harm upon themselves. It is comparable in a heedless person who finds himself in diplomatic circles laden with protocol, yet he makes horrendous breaches of protocol without realizing it. With regard to God, the matter is obviously much more serious, as one's soul may be harmed by one's own breaches. In this case, the protocol involves knowledge of God and what He has enjoined and prescribed. Freedom and purification. Imam Mawlud speaks next about freedom, which is achieved when one realizes the qualities of shame and humility and empties oneself of their opposites, shamelessness and arrogance. With these qualities come true freedom, wealth, and dignity, which require manumission from the bonds of one's whims. People may claim to be free, yet they cannot control themselves from gluttony in the presence of food, or from illicit sexual relations when the opportunity presents itself. Such a notion of freedom is devoid of substance. Freedom has real meaning when, for example, a situation of temptation arises and one remains God-fearing, steadfast, and in control of one's actions. This holds true even when the temptation produces flickers of desire in a person who nonetheless refrains from indulging. Imam al-Ghazali speaks at length about the desires of our limbs and organs and refers to the stomach and the genitals as being the two dominators. If they are under control, all other aspects of desire are kept in check. The tongue is also a formidable obstacle. There are people, for example, who appear incapable of refraining from backbiting and speaking ill of others, and they often do so without realizing it. It is common for people to dislike impoverishment or humility because they perceive them as abjectness. Yet the Prophet ﷺ chose poverty over wealth. He did not have money in his home. He did not have jewelry. He slept on the floor upon a bed made of leather that was stuffed with palm leaves. And he had 2 pillows in his room for guests. In much of today's culture, living this way would be considered extreme poverty. Imam Mawlud stresses that dignity with God comes to those who are humble before Him, those who place prime value on how they are received by their Maker, and not by how they will be judged, by the ephemeral norms of people. Dignity and honor are gifts. The Quran says about God, "You exalt whomever you will, and you abase whomever you will." Surah 3, Ayat 26. Proofs of this divine law abound. There are many accounts, for example, of people who were once in positions of authority and wealth, but now find themselves as paupers, completely stripped of their former glory, reduced in many instances to wards of the state. God is powerful over all things, and all good authority and provision are in His hand, not ours. From this, we derive an important principle. If one ignobly pursues an attribute, he or she will be dawned with its opposite. God humbles and humiliates the haughty ones, those who arrogantly seek out rank and glory before the eyes of people. The Quran gives the examples of the Pharaoh and Korah and their abject fall and disgrace. Conversely, if one is humbled before God, He will render him or her honorable. Imam Mawlud goes on to explain that there is no salvation like the heart's salvation, given that all the limbs and organs respond to its desires. If one's heart is safe, so too are the limbs and organs, for they carry out the deeds inspired by the heart. The limbs and organs of the corrupt become instruments through which corruption is spread, as the Quran states, "Today we shall set a seal upon their mouths, and their hands will speak to us, and their feet shall bear witness to what they have earned." Quran, Surah 36, Ayah 65. And spend on the needy in the way of God, and do not throw yourselves into ruin by your own hands. Quran, Surah 2, Ayah 195. And we shall say, taste the chastisement of burning, that is for what your hands have forwarded for yourselves, and God never wrongs his servants. Quran, Surah 3, Ayah 181 to 82. They shall have immense torment on the day when their tongues and their hands and their legs bear witness against them for what they had been doing. Quran, Surah 24, Ayah 23-24. According to a hadith, the tongue is the interpreter of the heart. Hypocrisy is wretched, because the hypocrite says with his tongue what is not in his heart. He wrongs his tongue and oppresses his heart. But if the heart is sound, the condition of the tongue follows suit. We are commanded to be upright in our speech, which is a gauge of the heart's state. According to a prophetic tradition, each morning, when the limbs and organs awaken in the spiritual world, they shudder and say to the tongue, "Fear God concerning us, for if you are upright, then we are upright. If you deviate, we too deviate." Engaging in the regular remembrance of God, zikr, safeguards the tongue and replaces idle talk with the words and phrases that raise one in honor. The tongue is essential in developing courtesy with God, which is the whole point of existence.